I'm carrying a baby prophecy says we'll end him. The Alpha King says prophecies lie. The council chamber smelled of old smoke and older fear. Deirdre stood in the center of the stone circle, one hand pressed protectively against her belly where the smallest curve had begun to show beneath her worn tunic. The elders sat in judgment above her, their faces carved from winter and disappointment, and she knew before the seer even opened her mouth that there would be no mercy here. The ancient woman emerged from the shadows like something dragged up from a grave. Her eyes were milky white, unseeing yet somehow piercing straight through to Deirdre's soul. Gnarled fingers reached forward, hovering inches from Deirdre's stomach, and the temperature in the room plummeted. "The child," the seer rasped, her voice like wind through dead leaves. "I see. I see." Deirdre's wolf whimpered inside her, every instinct screaming to run, to protect, to fight. But there were 12 pack warriors at the doors, and Elder Matthias had made it clear what happened to wolves who fled judgment. She forced herself to stand still, to breathe, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. The seer's milky eyes rolled back. "Death. I see death walking in this child's shadow. The most powerful wolf in all kingdoms will fall by this hand." Her skeletal finger pointed at Deirdre's belly like a condemnation. "The Alpha King himself, Nikolai of the Northern Kingdom, will meet his end because of the life you carry." The words crashed through the chamber like thunder. Deirdre heard gasps, whispers, the scrape of chairs as elders recoiled. Her knees threatened to buckle. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not. My baby isn't." "Silence!" Elder Matthias rose, his jowls quivering with righteous fury. "You dare bring this curse into our pack? A child prophesied to kill the Alpha King? Do you have any concept of what his wrath will do to us when he learns we harbor such a threat?" "I didn't know." Deirdre's voice broke. "I didn't ask for this. Please, it's just a baby. My baby. Whatever the prophecy says, I would never." "The prophecy has spoken." Matthias's voice was final as a tomb ceiling. "The council has no choice. Deirdre of the Southern Pack, you are hereby cast out. You have until moonrise to cross our borders. If you or your cursed child are found on our lands after that, you will be executed as the threat you are." The world tilted. Deirdre grabbed at the edge of the stone altar to keep from falling, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Cast out, exiled, alone with nothing but the clothes on her back and a baby the entire supernatural world would want dead. "You can't. I have nowhere to go. I'll die out there." "Then die away from us." Matthias turned his back on her, and one by one, the other elders did the same. The seer melted back into the shadows, her prophecy delivered, her purpose served, leaving nothing but devastation in her wake. The warriors hauled Deirdre to her feet. She had 1 hour to gather what little she owned before they escorted her to the border, if you could call being dragged through the packlands at Spearpoint an escort. Faces she'd known all her life turned away as she passed. Children were pulled inside houses. No one would risk association with the cursed wolf. By the time they shoved her across the border marker and slammed the gate behind her, full dark had fallen. Deirdre stumbled forward into wilderness, into nothing, into a future that looked like a black hole waiting to swallow her whole. She walked for hours, maybe days. Time lost meaning when you were running on fear and the desperate need to put distance between yourself and everyone who wanted you dead. The forest closed in around her like a fist, all twisted branches and strange sounds that made her wolf hackles rise. She had no food, no water, no destination except away. Her hand never left her belly. "I've got you," she whispered to the tiny life growing inside her. "I don't care what they say. I'll protect you. I promise." The baby couldn't hear her yet, she knew that, but saying the words aloud made them feel true. Made the crushing weight of loneliness lighter by the smallest fraction. When her legs finally gave out, Deirdre collapsed against a massive pine tree and let herself cry. Great heaving sobs that tore from her chest and echoed through the empty forest. She cried for her lost home, for her murdered future, for the innocent baby who'd been condemned before drawing its first breath. She cried until she had nothing left, until she was hollow and wrung out, and so tired her bones ached. That's when she noticed the marker. It was carved into the tree across from her, a wolf's head crowned with angular runes that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. The Northern Kingdom's symbol, which meant she'd crossed into Alpha King Nikolai's territory. The wolf her child was prophesied to kill. A hysterical laugh bubbled up her throat. Of course. Of course fate would drive her straight into the arms of the one creature in all the kingdoms who had the most reason to destroy her. Maybe it was fitting. Maybe this was how it was supposed to end, not cast out and starving in neutral territory, but facing the monster from the prophecy head-on. Except Deirdre had heard stories about Nikolai. Everyone had. The Alpha King who'd ruled for 3 centuries, who'd conquered every challenge to his throne with brutal efficiency, whose silver eyes could freeze the blood in your veins. They said he was unkillable. They said he was cursed to walk alone, never finding his true mate. They said he was more beast than man, and now her baby was destined to be his death. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, pressing both hands to her stomach. "I've led us straight to him. But maybe if I explain, maybe if I beg." Her words cut off as lights appeared through the trees, torches, voices, the sound of boots on frozen ground and the distinctive jingle of weapons. Border Patrol. Deirdre tried to stand, to run, but her exhausted body refused to cooperate. She managed to get her knees under her before the patrol rounded the corner and the torchlight caught her full in the face. "Intruder!" someone shouted. "Southern pack by her scent." Deirdre threw up her hands. "Please, I don't mean any harm. I was exiled. I'm just trying to—" "On your feet. Hands where we can see them." She tried. She genuinely tried. But 3 days of walking without food or water had taken their toll, and the stress, and the baby, sapping what little strength she had left. The world spun sickeningly. "She's pregnant," another voice said, closer now. A woman's voice, edged with something that might have been sympathy. "She's half dead on her feet." "Doesn't matter. Protocol says all intruders get brought to the palace. Let the Alpha King decide what to do with her." The Alpha King? Nikolai. Deirdre's vision grayed at the edges. She heard herself say something, a plea, maybe, or a prayer, but the words came out slurred and wrong. Then the ground rushed up to meet her and she knew nothing else. Silk sheets. That was Deirdre's first coherent thought as consciousness returned. She was lying on silk sheets, impossibly soft against her skin, and beneath that was a mattress so comfortable it felt like floating on a cloud. For a confused moment she thought she'd died and this was some unexpected afterlife. Then she opened her eyes. The chamber was enormous, easily 4 times the size of the small room she'd shared with 3 other pack members back home. Thick tapestries covered stone walls, depicting wolves running beneath full moons in threads of silver and midnight blue. A fire crackled in a hearth so large she could have walked into it without ducking. The bed she lay in had 4 posts carved with intricate designs, each one showing wolves in different poses, hunting, howling, protecting their young. This wasn't a cell. This was a palace chamber. And standing at the foot of the bed, watching her with eyes the color of winter steel, was the most magnificent wolf she'd ever seen in her life. Nikolai. She knew him instantly, though she'd never seen him before. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge, making the air itself seem to bend around his presence. He was tall, taller than any wolf should be, with broad shoulders that strained against a black shirt, and dark hair shot through with silver at the temples. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw like it had been cut from granite, lips pressed into a line that could have meant anything from amusement to murder. But it was his eyes that pinned her in place. Silver and ancient and knowing, they studied her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. She couldn't look away, couldn't even blink. And then it happened. The mate bond snapped into place between them like lightning striking the same spot twice. Deirdre felt it slam into her chest, stealing her breath, stealing her thoughts, stealing everything except the overwhelming knowledge that this was him, her mate, her other half, the soul the universe had crafted specifically to complete hers. No, 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 no. This couldn't be happening. This was impossible. This was... There it is, Nikolai said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her bones. The corner of his mouth quirked up. I wondered if you'd feel it too. Deirdre scrambled backward on the bed, silk sheets tangling around her legs. This isn't... possible? He moved closer with predatory grace, each step measured and deliberate. I assure you it's very possible. Unlikely, perhaps. Inconvenient, definitely. But possible. He tilted his head, silver eyes never leaving hers. Tell me, Deirdre of the former Southern Pack, do you believe in fate? How do you know my name? I make it my business to know everything that happens in my kingdom. And beyond. He stopped at the edge of the bed so close she could feel the heat radiating from him, smell pine and winter wind and something uniquely him. I know you were cast out 3 days ago. I know the seer's prophecy. The child you carry is destined to bring about my death. I know you collapsed at my border more dead than alive. His gaze dropped to her belly, and something fierce and possessive flashed in those silver eyes. I know you've been doing everything in your power to protect that baby, even though the entire supernatural world will want it destroyed. Terror and confusion warred in Deirdre's chest. If you know about the prophecy, then why am I in a palace chamber instead of a dungeon? Why haven't you killed you? Nikolai's smile was sharp as broken glass. Because prophecies lie, little wolf. I've been around long enough to know that much. He sat on the edge of the bed, and the casual intimacy of the gesture made Deirdre's heart stutter. The mate bond hummed between them, demanding she move closer, demanding she touch him, demanding she trust this stranger with her life and her child's life and everything in between. Besides, Nikolai continued, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers brushed her cheek, and electricity sparked across her skin. You're my mate, my true mate. I've been searching for you for 3 centuries, and I'll be damned if I let some ancient hag's prophecy take you from me now. Your mate! Deirdre's voice came out strangled. This has to be wrong. The universe wouldn't... It can't... Can't what? Give me a mate whose child is prophesied to kill me? His laugh was dark and amused. Seems exactly like something the universe would do, honestly. But here's what I believe. That baby isn't meant to kill me. Prophecies are tricky things, full of wordplay and double meanings. Maybe your child will end me in some other way. Maybe the prophecy is complete rubbish. Either way, I'm not afraid. He leaned closer until his lips were inches from hers, until she could see flecks of blue in those silver eyes. But you are, he murmured. Afraid of me, afraid of the bond, afraid I'll hurt you or your baby. His hand moved to rest gently against her stomach, and despite everything, the prophecy, the fear, the utter insanity of this situation, Deirdre's wolf purred at the touch. I won't. You're under my protection now. Both of you. And I protect what's mine. I'm not yours, Deirdre whispered, but even she could hear how the words lacked conviction. Nikolai's smile was wolfish and knowing. Not yet. The next weeks passed in a strange dream that Deirdre kept expecting to wake from. True to his word, Nikolai protected her. She had an entire suite of rooms in the palace, servants who brought her meals without her asking, healers who checked on her, and the baby daily. Everything she could possibly need appeared as if by magic, and Nikolai himself was a constant presence. He brought her breakfast most mornings, sitting across from her at the small table by the window and asking about her night, her comfort, her needs. He walked with her through the snow-covered gardens every afternoon, his coat draped over her shoulders when the wind picked up. He sat in her chambers in the evenings, reading while she embroidered or simply stared into the fire, the companionable silence between them both peaceful and charged with unspoken things. He never pressured her, never demanded she acknowledge the mate bond or act on the attraction that crackled between them like static before a storm. He simply existed in her space, patient and persistent, letting her grow accustomed to his presence. It was working. Deirdre found herself watching for him, listening for his footsteps in the hall, feeling disappointed on the rare occasions he was called away on kingdom business. Her wolf had fully accepted him as their mate, purring contentedly whenever he was near, whining when he left. And her human side. Her human side was falling, fast and helpless, for the monster who was supposed to be her enemy. Tonight they walked through the winter garden beneath a full moon, their breath misting in the cold air. Nikolai had been telling her about the history of the Northern Kingdom, his voice warm with pride and affection for his lands. Deirdre found herself smiling, genuinely smiling for the first time since before the prophecy. "You love it here," she said. It wasn't a question. "It's my home. Has been for 300 years. He glanced down at her. "I'm hoping you might come to love it too." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Deirdre stopped walking, her hand unconsciously moving to her belly where the baby was starting to show more prominently. "Nikolai, I..." She struggled for words. "I don't understand you. This should be impossible. You should hate me, or at least fear what my child might do to you. Instead, you're courting me like we're normal wolves who met under normal circumstances." "Who says we're not normal?" He turned to face her fully, silver eyes catching the moonlight. "So there's a prophecy. So what? I've been prophesied to die alone and mateless, and yet here you are. Maybe prophecies are just stories we tell ourselves, ways of making sense of chaos. Or maybe they're warnings we ignore at our peril. Maybe." He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his gaze. "But I've spent 3 centuries being careful, being alone, being the monster everyone expects. I'm tired of it, Deirdre. I'm tired of living half a life. And then you appear, my mate, finally. After all this time, and I'm supposed to turn you away because of some old woman's vision? I won't do it." His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing across her lower lip with devastating gentleness. "I won't do it," he repeated, voice dropping to a rough whisper. "Because from the moment I saw you in that bed, something in me that's been frozen for centuries started to thaw. You make me feel alive, little wolf. You and this baby make me believe in possibilities I'd given up on. So no, I won't let you go. I won't let fear win." Deirdre's heart thundered against her ribs. The mate bond sang between them, demanding, pleading, and her own traitorous body leaned into his touch like a flower toward the sun. "This is insane," she breathed. "Probably." His lips curved. "But when has anything worth having ever been sane?" And then he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, giving her every chance to pull away. But Deirdre didn't pull away. She couldn't. The mate bond roared to life between them, and she found herself rising on her toes, hands fisting in his shirt, kissing him back with 3 weeks of pent-up longing and fear and desperate, impossible hope. Nikolai made a sound low in his throat, pleased and possessive, and pulled her closer. one hand tangling in her hair while the other settled protectively at the small of her back. The kiss deepened, turned hungry, and Deirdre felt herself falling into it, into him, into the promise of something she'd never dared to dream about. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nikolai pressed his forehead to hers. "Mine," he whispered against her lips. "Say you're mine." And despite the prophecy, despite the danger, despite every logical reason she should run, "Yours," Deirdre heard herself say. "I'm yours." The words sealed something between them, something neither could take back. As they stood there in the moonlight, the baby kicked for the first time, as if in agreement. Whatever came next, whatever the prophecy truly meant, they would face it together. The marketplace smelled of roasted chestnuts and fresh bread, spices from the south, and honey wine from the mountain territories. Deirdre breathed it in deeply, one hand resting on her rounded belly as she walked between the colorful stalls. 6 weeks had passed since that first kiss in the moonlight. 6 weeks of falling deeper into something that felt like a dream she'd eventually wake from. But for now, she let herself pretend this could be real. "The lady would like some of those apples," one of her guards said, nodding to the fruit vendor. There were always guards now, 3 of Nikolai's elite wolves who shadowed her everywhere outside the palace walls. She'd protested at first, but Nikolai had been immovable on this point. The prophecy had spread across all kingdoms, and not everyone believed as he did that it could be defied. The vendor's eyes widened as he recognized her. Most of the Northern Kingdom wolves had accepted their Alpha King's choice to protect her, but Deirdre could still feel the wariness in their gazes, the way conversation stopped when she passed. She was the cursed wolf, the one carrying death in her womb. "Those ones," she said softly, pointing to the honey-crisp apples Nikolai favored. She'd planned to surprise him with them tonight. He'd been locked in council meetings all day, dealing with border disputes and trade agreements. And she knew he loved these particular apples, even though he'd never admit to something as simple as a favorite fruit. The thought made her smile. She'd learned so much about him in these weeks. The way he took his coffee black as pitch, how he ran his hand through his hair when frustrated, the scar on his shoulder from a battle 2 centuries ago that still ached when storms rolled in. She knew he sang old war ballads in the bath when he thought no one could hear, that he secretly fed scraps to the kitchen cats, that he read poetry in dead languages by firelight. She knew him, and terrifyingly, she loved him. The baby kicked against her palm as if sensing her thoughts. Deirdre rubbed the spot gently. "I know," she whispered. "Complicated doesn't even begin to cover it." The vendor bagged her apples with shaking hands, refusing payment when she offered coin. One of the guards paid anyway, then handed her the bag with a respectful nod. Deirdre was just turning to head back when she felt it. A prickle at the base of her skull. Her wolf suddenly alert and alarmed. Something was wrong. The marketplace hadn't changed. Wolves still haggled over winter squash and wool blankets. Children still darted between stalls, laughing. But underneath the normal sounds, Deirdre detected something off, a current of wrong that made her hackles rise. "We should return to the palace," she said quietly. Her lead guard, a grizzled wolf named Torsten, immediately scanned the crowd, his hand moving to the blade at his hip. "What is it?" "I don't." The attack came from 3 directions at once. They'd been waiting, blending into the crowd, and they moved with practiced precision. 5 wolves in nondescript cloaks rushed forward, blades already drawn and aimed directly at Deirdre. The guards reacted instantly, forming a protective barrier around her, but the attackers had planned for that. A blade slipped past Torsten's defense, aimed straight for Deirdre's stomach. She twisted away, wolf reflexes taking over, but she wasn't fast enough. The steel bit into her side, a line of fire that stole her breath. The bag of apples fell, fruit rolling across cobblestones as Deirdre stumbled. "The child!" One of the attackers snarled. "Kill the cursed child!" Torsten roared, his wolf rising to the surface as he caught the assassin by the throat and slammed him into the ground with bone-crushing force. The other guards engaged the remaining attackers, and the marketplace erupted into chaos. Wolves screamed and scattered. Stalls overturned. Blood splattered across snow-dusted stone. Deirdre pressed her hand to her side, feeling hot blood well between her fingers. The baby kicked frantically inside her, and terror greater than any she'd ever known seized her heart. "No, no, please." An attacker broke through the guard's defense, blade raised for a killing blow. Deirdre threw up her arms uselessly, knowing she couldn't stop it, couldn't save herself or her baby. The attacker's head separated from his body before the blade could fall. Nikolai stood where the assassin had been, silver eyes blazing with a fury so intense the air itself seemed to warp around him. Blood dripped from the claws that had extended from his fingertips, each one sharp as razors. He looked at the remaining attackers, and what Deirdre saw in his face made her wolf whimper and press low in submission. This was the Alpha King. This was the monster who'd ruled for 3 centuries, who'd crushed armies and torn apart anyone who threatened what was his. There was nothing human in those silver eyes now, only ancient, terrible wrath. "You dare," Nikolai said, his voice dropping to a register that vibrated through bone and marrow, "to touch what is mine." He moved like liquid death. The first attacker didn't even have time to scream. Nikolai's claws punched through his chest and ripped out his heart in a spray of crimson. The second tried to run. Nikolai caught him by the skull and slammed him face first into the stone with such force the cobblestones cracked. The third raised his blade in desperate defense. Nikolai caught the steel with his bare hand, snapped it like a twig, then drove the jagged end through the assassin's throat. It was over in seconds. 5 trained killers reduced to broken bodies in the snow. And Nikolai stood among them, chest heaving, drenched in blood that wasn't his, looking every inch the nightmare creature children were warned about in bedtime stories. Then his eyes found Deirdre, crumpled against an overturned stall with blood seeping through her fingers, and the monster's face cracked into something raw and terrified. "Deirdre!" He was across the distance in a heartbeat, dropping to his knees beside her, hands hovering over her wound like he was afraid to touch her and make it worse. "Gods, no. How bad? How bad is it?" "I don't know," she gasped. "The baby. Nikolai, the baby. Is fine. We'll be fine. I won't let anything happen to either of you." He scooped her into his arms with devastating gentleness, the same hands that had just torn through 5 wolves now cradling her like she was made of spun glass. "Hold on, little wolf. Just hold on." The journey back to the palace blurred into fragments, Nikolai's arms tight around her, his voice rough and constant in her ear, telling her to breathe, to stay with him. The palace healers rushing forward with herbs and hot water and urgent clipped instructions. Nikolai refusing to leave even when they told him he was in the way, his hand gripping hers hard enough to hurt while they cleaned and stitched the wound. The blade had carved a shallow line across her ribs, but missed anything vital. More importantly, it had missed the baby entirely. When the head healer finally announced that both mother and child would recover fully, Deirdre watched 3 centuries of iron control crack as Nikolai's shoulders sagged with relief. "Out," he told the healers, his voice rough as gravel. "All of you. Now." They fled. Probably wise, given that their Alpha King was still covered in blood and trembling with the aftermath of rage and terror. The door closed, leaving Deirdre and Nikolai alone in the medical wing's private chamber. For a long moment, he just stood there, hands clenched into fists at his sides, breathing hard. "Nikolai, I almost lost you." His voice broke on the words. "Both of you. If I'd been 1 second slower, if they'd aimed better." He turned away, and Deirdre saw his shoulders shake. 300 years I've lived, fought wars, killed thousands. And I've never been afraid. Not like that. Not like seeing that blade about to. But it didn't. Deirdre struggled to sit up despite the healer's orders to rest, wincing as her stitched side pulled. We're fine, thanks to you and your guards. Thanks to luck. He spun back to face her, and the anguish in those silver eyes stole her breath. This is my fault. I knew keeping you here made you a target. I knew every wolf who fears the prophecy would see you as a threat. But I was selfish. I wanted... He cut himself off, jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jump. I wanted you, so I kept you close, even though it put you in danger. You think I'd be safer anywhere else? Deirdre pushed herself fully upright, ignoring the spike of pain. You think I'd survive a week on my own with every pack in every kingdom hunting me? Nikolai, you're the only reason I'm alive, the only reason my baby has a chance. Your baby who's prophesied to kill me. His laugh was bitter and broken. Maybe the prophecy's real after all. Maybe I'm supposed to die protecting you from the danger my own existence creates. Stop. Deirdre held out her hand, demanding, Come here. He hesitated, still radiating that terrible combination of fury and fear, but he came, crossing to the bed and taking her hand with a gentleness that belied the blood still drying on his skin. Listen to me, Deirdre said fiercely. I don't know what the prophecy means. Maybe we'll figure it out. Maybe we won't. But I do know this. You're not my enemy. You're my mate, my future, my child's father, if you'll still claim her. His eyes widened. Her? Deirdre pressed his hand to her rounded belly where the baby kicked vigorously, apparently no worse for their traumatic afternoon. The healers confirmed it while you were busy glowering at them. A girl. Something shifted in Nikolai's expression, wonder replacing anguish, tentative joy breaking through the cracks. A daughter. Your daughter, Deirdre corrected. Biology doesn't make a father. Choice does. Love does. And you already love her. I see it every time you look at me, every time you talk to her like she can hear you. His free hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing across her cheek with heartbreaking tenderness. I do. God's help me. I love her already. Love both of you more than I thought possible. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to hers. Which is why I need to end this. Need to find who sent those assassins and make sure they never threaten you again. Constantine. Torsten's voice came from the doorway. The guard stood there, battered but alive, his expression grim. Apologies for interrupting Alpha King, but you need to know. Before the last one died, I made him talk. They were sent by Alpha Constantine, of the Eastern Mountain Pack. Nikolai's eyes went cold as winter ice. Constantine. He's gathering allies, Torsten continued. Other alphas who fear the prophecy. They've formed a coalition to eliminate the child before she can fulfill her destiny. Today won't be the last attempt. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Deirdre felt the baby flutter anxiously inside her, as if sensing the danger closing in. She'd been naive to think Nikolai's protection alone would be enough. The entire supernatural world saw her daughter as a threat. Then I'll kill them all, Nikolai said simply. Every alpha in Constantine's coalition. Every wolf who dares threaten my family. I'll paint the kingdoms red before I let anyone harm you. The vow should have frightened her. Probably would have frightened her 6 weeks ago. But now, with his hand protective on her belly and the memory of how he'd destroyed those attackers without hesitation, Deirdre felt only fierce gratitude. This was the monster the world feared, and he was hers. We'll figure it out, she whispered. Together. Nikolai kissed her then, soft and desperate and achingly gentle despite the blood and violence and danger surrounding them. Together, he agreed against her lips, whatever comes. 3 days later, a blizzard locked the palace in walls of white. Wind howled against ancient stone, and snow piled so high it covered the first-floor windows. The palace emptied of most staff. Wolves headed home before they got trapped, leaving only essential guards and servants. Even the council meetings were postponed. For the first time since Deirdre had arrived, the palace felt quiet, intimate. Nikolai had barely left her side since the attack. He'd moved her into his private chambers, declaring her suite too far from his protection. Deirdre knew she should protest the presumption, but truthfully, she craved his presence. The terror of those blades aimed at her belly had shaken something loose inside her. Life was too short, too fragile, to waste time on propriety and fear. Now they sat before the massive fireplace in his chambers, Nikolai in a high-backed chair and Deirdre curled on the fur rug at his feet, head resting against his knee. His fingers played absently with her hair while the fire crackled and the storm raged outside. It felt like the world had narrowed to just this room, just them. "Tell me about the prophecy," Deirdre said quietly. "Your prophecy. You mentioned it once, but you never explained." His hand stilled in her hair. "What does it matter? It was a lifetime ago." "It matters because it shaped you. Because I want to understand the wolf I fell in love with." The admission hung between them. She'd never said it directly before, even though they both knew it was true. Nikolai's breath caught, his hand tightening in her hair, and when he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "I was 8 years old," he said finally. "My father had just died in battle, and the pack elders wanted to know if I'd inherited his strength or my mother's weakness. They brought in a seer, a different one than the hag who cursed you, but cut from the same cloth." His jaw clenched. "She looked at me with those dead white eyes and proclaimed that I would live centuries, but die alone and unmated. That the gods themselves had marked me for solitude as punishment for some unnamed sin." Deirdre's heart clenched. "You were a child. I was a future alpha who needed to be strong. So I took the prophecy and I weaponized it. I told myself that if I was meant to be alone, I'd be the most powerful alone wolf to ever live. I'd conquer so thoroughly that I'd never need anyone. I'd build an empire so vast that loneliness wouldn't matter." He laughed bitterly. "It worked. Mostly. I became exactly what I set out to be. The unconquerable Alpha King. And you were miserable." "I didn't let myself feel miserable. Didn't let myself feel anything except the focus required to maintain power." His hand resumed its gentle stroking through her hair. "Then you appeared, broken and pregnant, and so fierce in protecting your baby that it took my breath away. And the mate bond snapped into place, and suddenly that ancient prophecy crumbled to dust, because here you were, my mate, my future." Deirdre shifted, turning to look up at him. His silver eyes reflected firelight, and in them she saw centuries of loneliness finally giving way to hope. "So when I worry about my prophecy, about my baby being your death, I think about how wrong my prophecy was, and I refuse to believe fate would be so cruel as to finally give me a mate just to take her away." He slid from the chair to the rug beside her, pulling her against his chest. "Maybe our daughter is meant to end me by ending my solitude. Maybe the prophecy means something else entirely. Or maybe it's complete fiction. Either way, I choose to believe in this." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "In you. In us." The rightness of being in his arms, the warmth of his body against hers, made Deirdre's throat tight with emotion. But there was more he needed to know, more she needed to share if they were going to build a future together. "The baby's father," she said softly. "I need to tell you about him." Nikolai stiffened. "You don't have to." "I do. You should know." She took a breath, forcing the words out. "His name was Derek. He was one of the pack warriors, 20 years older than me. I'd just turned 18. Her hands clenched into fists. "He cornered me one night after a hunt. I said no. I fought. It didn't matter." The growl that rumbled through Nikolai's chest was subvocal but furious. Did you tell anyone? The elders. They said I must have led him on. That unmated females shouldn't go on hunts if they didn't want attention. The old shame burned in her throat. They exiled me for being cursed by the prophecy, but they celebrated Derek. He got praise for his strength, and I got a baby that everyone wanted dead. Where is he now? Nikolai's voice had gone deadly soft. I don't know. Still in the southern pack? Probably. She twisted to look at him. But it doesn't matter, because this baby, she wasn't made from love, but I love her. She's mine. My reason for surviving every horrible thing that came after. Nikolai's eyes blazed with silver fire. She's ours. That bastard donated biology, nothing more. I'll be her father. I'll teach her to hunt and fight and rule. I'll protect her with everything I am. His hand settled on Deirdre's belly. I swear it, little one. You're my daughter, my heir. And anyone who tries to harm you will answer to me. The baby kicked against his palm, and Nikolai's fierce expression softened into wonder. Deirdre felt something inside her that had been broken since Derek's attack finally begin to heal. This was what family was supposed to feel like. What love was supposed to be. I want you, she whispered. Want this. Want a future where we raise her together. Nikolai's eyes darkened with heat and hunger and something deeper. Are you sure? The healers said you need rest. I'm sure. She cupped his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw. Show me I'm yours. Make me believe this is real. His kiss was everything, claiming and tender, demanding and gentle, full of weeks of pent-up wanting. He lifted her carefully, mindful of her injury, and carried her to the massive bed. The fire cast dancing shadows across the carved posts as he laid her down on midnight silk sheets. You're beautiful, he murmured, trailing kisses down her throat. Brave and fierce and perfect. I don't deserve you. Good thing I'm not asking for deserve. Deirdre pulled him closer, reveling in the solid weight of him, the way his body fit against hers like they'd been made for this. I'm asking for always. Then always is what you'll get. They made love while the blizzard raged outside, slow and careful and achingly thorough. Nikolai touched her like she was precious, like she was his most treasured possession, and Deirdre let herself finally, fully believe in the mate bond between them. In the possibility of a future where prophecies didn't matter and love was enough. Afterward, she lay curled against his chest, his arms wrapped protectively around her. The baby kicked contentedly, and Deirdre felt peace settle into her bones. Whatever comes, Nikolai murmured into her hair. We face it together. I love you, Deirdre. You and our daughter. I love you too, she whispered. Outside, the storm howled, but inside these walls, wrapped in her mate's embrace, Deirdre finally felt safe. Morning came with chaos. Deirdre woke to shouting in the corridors, the sound of running feet and slamming doors. She sat up, instantly alert, one hand going to her belly. Beside her, the bed was empty. Nikolai was gone. Dread pooled in her stomach as she struggled out of bed, pulling on a robe. Her side ached where the assassin's blade had cut her, but she ignored it. Something was wrong. The very air felt charged with danger. She opened the door to find 2 guards posted outside, their expressions grim. "Where's Nikolai?" she demanded. "The throne room, my lady. There's been—" The guard hesitated. "The Alpha King ordered us to keep you here." "That's not an answer." Deirdre pushed past them, ignoring their protests. She'd lived her whole life being ordered around by males who thought they knew better. She was done with it. If something threatened her mate, threatened her future, she would face it head-on. The palace was in controlled chaos. Servants rushed about, and everywhere Deirdre looked, she saw guards in full armor. This wasn't normal palace activity. This was preparation for war. She reached the throne room doors to find them flanked by 4 of Nikolai's elite guards. They moved to block her entrance, but she fixed them with a stare she'd learned from watching Nikolai himself. The one that said she was their future Luna Queen, and they would obey, or face consequences. "Let me through." They exchanged glances, then stepped aside. The throne room was packed. Nikolai sat on his throne, silver eyes cold as winter, every inch the terrifying Alpha King. His council stood to one side, and in the center of the room, Deirdre's blood turned to ice. The seer stood there, the same ancient withered creature who'd pronounced the prophecy that destroyed Deirdre's life. Behind her stood a delegation of wolves, alphas, by the power radiating from them, dressed in formal regalia from various kingdoms. And at Nikolai's right hand, where his most trusted advisor should stand, was Marcus, Nikolai's closest friend. The wolf who'd been kind to Deirdre over these past weeks, who'd made her laugh with stories of Nikolai's youth, who'd seemed genuinely happy about the baby. The wolf who now refused to meet her eyes. "Deirdre." Nikolai's voice was carefully controlled, but she heard the strain underneath. "I told them you were resting." "I was. Until whatever this is woke me." She walked forward, shoulders back, refusing to show weakness even though her knees felt like water. "What's going on?" The seer's milky eyes turned toward her. "The prophecy must be addressed, child. The time has come to make a choice. Your mate's life, or your child's." "That's not a choice. That's an impossibility." Deirdre looked to Nikolai, searching for the mate who'd held her last night, who'd promised they'd face everything together. But his expression was closed off, unreadable. "Nikolai." "These alphas have brought evidence," he said, each word seeming to cost him. "Ancient texts from the founding pacts, blood magic rituals that can verify prophecies. They claim—" His jaw clenched. "They claim the only way to prevent your child from killing me is to separate you from her immediately after birth. You would be exiled and never see her again. She would be raised here under guard until the danger passes." The words hit Deirdre like physical blows. "No. It's for the best," Marcus said, finally stepping forward. His expression was pained but determined. "Deirdre, I know this seems cruel, but we've consulted every expert. The prophecy is real. The child will kill Nikolai unless you're kept apart. This way, everyone survives. This way, my baby grows up without her mother." Deirdre's voice shook with fury. "This way, I lose everything that matters. You call that survival? I call it necessary." Marcus looked to Nikolai. "You know I'm right. You've been letting your feelings cloud your judgment, but the evidence is clear. The mate bond doesn't change the prophecy's truth." One of the visiting alphas stepped forward, a hard-faced woman with scars across her throat. "Alpha King Nikolai, we respect your power, but this child represents a threat to the balance between all kingdoms. If she can kill you, what's to stop her from killing any of us? The prophecy must be contained." "By stealing a baby from her mother?" Deirdre's hands clenched into fists. "By exiling me for the crime of giving birth?" "It's not a punishment," the seer rasped. "It's a mercy. This way, the child lives. Nikolai lives. You simply sacrifice your right to motherhood for the greater good." The room spun. Deirdre looked desperately at Nikolai, searching for any sign of the wolf who'd held her, who'd promised to protect their daughter, who'd sworn they'd face everything together. But he sat frozen on his throne, face carved from stone, silent. "Nikolai," she whispered, "say something. Tell them this is insane." His silver eyes met hers, and what she saw in them broke her heart. Doubt, fear, and underneath it all, resignation. "Guards," he said quietly. "Escort Deirdre back to her chambers, for her protection, until we've had time to consider all options." "No." Deirdre backed away as guards approached. "No, you promised. You said we'd face this together. You said—" I'm trying to keep you alive. Nikolai's control cracked, fury and anguish bleeding through. Both of you. Can't you see that? I see you listening to them instead of trusting me. Trusting us. Tears burned her eyes as the guards took her arms. I see you becoming exactly what they expect. The monster who values power over love. The words hit him like a slap. For a moment his expression shattered and she saw raw pain in his eyes. Then the mask slammed back into place. Take her, he ordered. They dragged her from the throne room as she fought and screamed and pleaded. The last thing she saw before the doors closed was Nikolai sitting alone on his throne, head in his hands, looking more broken than she'd ever seen him. The guards deposited her in her chambers, not the suite she'd stayed in originally, but a smaller room with bars on the windows and guards posted outside. A prison in everything but name. Deirdre collapsed on the bed, hand pressed to her belly where the baby kicked frantically. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry, little one. I thought we'd be safe. I thought he'd protect us. But Nikolai had chosen his kingdom over his mate, had listened to advisors and prophecies instead of his heart. And now Deirdre was alone again, more thoroughly trapped than she'd been even when her pack cast her out. Because this time, she'd made the mistake of believing in love. Nikolai's private library occupied the highest tower of the palace, a circular room lined floor to ceiling with texts collected over 3 centuries of rule. Ancient leather-bound volumes in dead languages, scrolls preserved behind glass, maps of kingdoms that no longer existed. This was where he came when problems couldn't be solved with teeth and claws. Tonight, the room felt like a prison. He'd been searching for 6 hours straight, ever since he'd sent Deirdre away. Ever since he'd seen the devastation in her eyes when he'd chosen duty over trust. The memory of her voice. I see you becoming exactly what they expect. The monster who values power over love, carved through his chest like silver. But what choice did he have? The alphas had brought texts, evidence, blood magic verification. Marcus, his closest friend for 2 centuries, had vouched for their authenticity. And underneath all of it ran a current of truth he couldn't ignore. He'd always known fate would find a way to make him pay for his centuries of violence and conquest. Nikolai slammed another worthless volume shut, dust puffing into the candlelight. Nothing. Every text the council had presented pointed to the same conclusion: separation of mother and child, exile, sacrifice for the greater good. Except. His wolf paced restlessly, snarling its disagreement. The mate bond, which had settled warm and content after the night he'd spent with Deirdre, now felt stretched thin and screaming. Wrong, 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 it insisted. Deirdre was his mate. Their daughter was innocent. And he was the Alpha King. When had he ever let others dictate his choices? He moved to the oldest section of the library, where volumes were kept in climate-controlled cases because they'd crumble to dust if exposed to air. These were texts from the founding packs, from before the kingdoms had formed. If there were answers about prophecies and their true meanings, they'd be here. The first 3 cases held nothing useful. But the 4th... Nikolai's breath caught. It was a slim volume bound in preserved wolf hide, the cover stamped with the same rune pattern that marked his territory borders. The True Tongue, a guide to prophetic translation. His hands shook as he carefully lifted it free, carried it to his reading desk, and began to page through brittle parchment. The text was dense, written in the old language, but Nikolai had lived long enough to read it fluently. He devoured page after page, his silver eyes moving faster as understanding dawned. Prophecies weren't literal. They were written in symbolic language, metaphor, and meaning layered beneath surface words. The phrase, "bring death," could mean transformation. "End" could signify completion rather than destruction, which meant the seer's interpretation. Nikolai's blood turned cold. He grabbed the texts the council had presented, spreading them across his desk beside the translation guide. Under close examination, knowing what to look for, the forgeries were obvious. The language was too modern. The paper too new, despite being treated to look aged. And the interpretations deliberately chosen to inflame fear rather than seek understanding. Someone had manipulated him. Manipulated all of them. The door to the library burst open. Torsten stood there, the loyal guard's face grave. Alpha King, you need to see this. Now. Nikolai followed him down twisting stairs to the dungeons, where they kept the most dangerous prisoners. Torsten led him to an interrogation chamber where one of the assassins from the marketplace attack hung in silver chains. The one they'd kept alive for questioning. Tell him, Torsten ordered. The assassin's face was bruised and bloody, but his eyes held defeated resignation. Alpha Constantine paid us, but the orders came from inside your own palace. We were told exactly when and where your mate would be, exactly how many guards would accompany her. Someone on your council set up the attack. The world seemed to tilt. Who? Don't know his name. We dealt with intermediaries. But I can tell you this. The seer who came with the delegation? She's Constantine's cousin. The whole prophecy interpretation was designed to separate you from your mate, weaken you before they move against the Northern Kingdom. The assassin laughed bitterly. You were supposed to kill your own mate to protect yourself. Instead, you'd have destroyed the only thing making you strong. Rage, unlike anything Nikolai had felt in decades, roared through his veins. His wolf surged to the surface, demanding blood, demanding vengeance. The ancient texts were forgeries. The seer was a plant. And someone in his own council, someone he'd trusted, had betrayed him. Marcus. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Marcus had been the one pushing hardest for separation. Marcus had vouched for the Alpha's evidence. Marcus had convinced him that sacrificing his mate bond was necessary. Marcus had been working with Constantine all along. Nikolai spun toward Torsten. Where is he? Council chambers. They're waiting for your decision about... Nikolai didn't wait to hear the rest. He moved through the palace like a hurricane, his power radiating outward in waves that sent servants scrambling out of his path. Guards snapped to attention and fell in behind him, sensing their Alpha's fury. By the time he reached the council chambers, he had 20 elite wolves at his back. The doors exploded inward under his force. Marcus stood at the head of the table with the seer and 3 visiting Alphas. They turned at his entrance, and Nikolai watched Marcus's expression shift from confidence to dawning fear. Nikolai, have you made your decision? My decision, Nikolai said, his voice dropping to that subvocal register that vibrated through bone, is that you're a traitor. That you've worked with Constantine to manipulate me, to weaken me by destroying my mate bond. That the evidence you presented was forged, the prophecy deliberately misinterpreted, and the attack on my mate orchestrated from within my own council. Marcus's face went white. That's not... You're being paranoid. The evidence is real. I was trying to save you. You were trying to make me vulnerable. Nikolai moved forward, each step measured and lethal. You knew I'd been searching for my mate for centuries. You knew finding her would make me stronger, not weaker. So you created a scenario where I'd destroy that bond myself, leaving me isolated and broken. Perfect timing for Constantine to challenge my rule. The seer tried to run. She made it 3 steps before Nikolai's guards cut off her escape. The prophecy is real, she shrieked. The child will end you. You're right about that. Nikolai smiled, sharp and cold. But not the way you think. See, I found the translation texts, the ones that explain prophetic language. End doesn't mean kill, it means complete, transform. My daughter isn't prophesied to murder me. She's meant to end my loneliness by giving me a family, end my isolation by completing my mate bond, End the old Alpha King and help birth something better. Marcus backed away as Nikolai advanced. Please. We've been friends for 2 centuries. I was trying to protect you. You were trying to use me. Nikolai's claws extended. You knew I'd do anything to protect my mate. Even destroy my bond with her if I thought it was necessary. But you miscalculated. Because love isn't weakness. His hand shot forward, closing around Marcus's throat. It's the most powerful force in the world. The crack of Marcus's neck breaking echoed through the chamber. The visiting alphas tried to fight. They lasted seconds. Nikolai was 3 centuries of accumulated power and rage, and they'd threatened his mate, his child, his future. He tore through them with brutal efficiency, painting the council chamber walls crimson. When it was over, only the seer remained alive, cowering in the corner. Tell Constantine, Nikolai said, his silver eyes blazing, that he's declared war on the wrong Alpha, that the Northern Kingdom stands stronger than ever, and that if he values his life, he'll crawl back to his mountain and pray I'm feeling merciful when I come for him. He let her run, let her carry the message. Then he turned to Torsten. Burn these forgeries. Send word to all kingdoms that the prophecy has been misinterpreted and my mate and child are under my absolute protection. Anyone who threatens them answers to me personally. He was already moving toward the door, toward Deirdre. And someone find out why my mate hasn't answered through our bond in the last hour. The bond. Why hadn't he noticed sooner? The mate bond had gone quiet, not severed but distant, muffled. Nikolai reached for it now, pouring his consciousness down that connection and felt pain, fear, distress. His wolf roared. Nikolai ran. He burst through the palace corridors, his enhanced speed blurring the world around him. Guards scrambled aside. Servants pressed against walls. He took stairs 3 at a time, racing toward the chambers where he'd imprisoned his mate. Imprisoned her? Gods. What had he done? The guards outside her door barely managed to unlock it before he was through. Deirdre lay curled on the bed, both hands pressed to her swollen belly, her face twisted in agony. The sheets beneath her were soaked with blood and fluid. Too much blood. No. Nikolai crossed to her in a heartbeat, gathering her into his arms. Deirdre, I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know the truth now. The prophecy was manipulated. Marcus is dead. You're safe. Our daughter is safe. Just hold on. Her eyes fluttered open, glazed with pain. Nikolai. The baby. She's coming. Too early. Something's wrong. Terror, unlike anything he'd felt in 300 years, seized his heart. He'd survived wars and challenges and centuries of isolation, but the thought of losing his mate and child shattered him. Healers! His roar shook the palace foundations. Now! The birthing chamber became a battlefield of a different kind. They'd moved Deirdre here because it was equipped for complications, medical equipment, herbs, supplies. But none of it seemed enough as Deirdre's body struggled with labor that had come too soon, triggered by stress and fear and the trauma of separation from her mate. She's only 7 months along, the head healer said, her voice tight with worry. The baby's not ready and there's too much bleeding. Nikolai refused to leave Deirdre's side, his hand gripped tight in hers as another contraction tore through her. Her scream ripped at his soul. You can do this, he murmured desperately, pressing kisses to her sweat-soaked hair. You're the strongest wolf I've ever known. Our daughter needs you. I need you. Please. Hurts, Deirdre gasped. Can't, Nikolai, I can't. You can. Breathe with me, that's it. He matched his breathing to hers, using the mate bond to push his strength into her, to lend her everything he had. I was wrong to doubt you. Wrong to listen to them instead of trusting us. But I'm here now and I'm not leaving. You're not alone. Another contraction, more blood. The healers exchanged worried glances that made Nikolai's wolf snarl with panic. Then something shifted. A glow began to emanate from Deirdre's skin, soft at first, then growing stronger. Silver light like moonlight made manifest, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. The healers gasped and stepped back. "What's happening?" Nikolai demanded. "I don't—" Deirdre's eyes widened as power surged through her, ancient and familiar and completely new. "I feel— oh gods! Nikolai, I feel—" The light intensified, flowing from her skin to pool in her belly where their daughter waited. And in that illumination, Nikolai saw the truth written in her very essence, bloodline markers he'd only read about in the oldest texts, power that hadn't walked the earth in 1,000 years. "Luna Queen," the head healer breathed, dropping to her knees. "She's descended from the Luna Queens, the ancient bloodline that had ruled before the Alpha Kings rose to power. Female wolves who could channel the moon itself, whose power was rooted in protection and creation rather than destruction. They'd been thought extinct, hunted to death centuries ago by alphas who feared their strength. But one line had survived, hidden and dormant, until Deirdre. "That's why," Nikolai said, understanding dawning. "That's why the prophecy was about our child. Not just any child, but one born from a Luna Queen bloodline and an Alpha King, the two most powerful wolf lines combined." Deirdre's grip on his hand tightened as her newfound power surged higher. The bleeding slowed, then stopped. Her body, which had been failing moments ago, suddenly blazed with strength and purpose. "She's coming," Deirdre gasped. I can do this." And she did. With Nikolai at her side, lending his strength through their bond, with her Luna Queen power awakened and burning bright, Deirdre pushed through the pain and fear. The healers worked frantically, but it was Deirdre's own power that saved them both, wrapping her daughter in protective light, giving her the strength to survive being born too soon. The baby's first cry split the air like a bell ringing. Nikolai watched through tears as the healer lifted their daughter, impossibly tiny, impossibly perfect, with silver eyes that matched his own, and that same moonlight glow radiating from her skin. "A girl," the healer said, her voice awed. "A healthy, beautiful girl." They placed the baby on Deirdre's chest, and Nikolai leaned over both of them, his family, his entire world contained in this moment. The baby's cries quieted as she felt her mother's heartbeat, her tiny fist curling around Deirdre's finger. "She's perfect," Deirdre sobbed, her face radiant despite exhaustion. The Luna Queen power still glimmered beneath her skin, transforming her from the frightened outcast he'd found at his borders into something magnificent. "Our daughter, our miracle." Nikolai pressed his forehead to Deirdre's, careful not to disturb the baby between them. "I'm sorry. For doubting you. For listening to them. For locking you away when I should have trusted our bond. Can you forgive me? You came back." Deirdre's free hand came up to cup his face. "You found the truth, and you came back. That's what matters." The baby made a soft sound, her silver eyes blinking open to study her parents. And when she looked at Nikolai, he felt the prophecy settle into place. Not a curse, but a blessing. This child would end the lonely Alpha King he'd been and help create the father and mate he was meant to become. "Welcome to the world, little one," he whispered, his finger stroking her tiny cheek. "You're safe. You're loved. And I'll never let anyone hurt you." The baby's power pulsed in response to his voice. Not threatening, but recognizing, accepting her father. Outside the birthing chamber, alarm bells began to ring. Constantine had chosen his moment well. The palace was in chaos from Nikolai's purge of the council. The Alpha King's mate had just given birth. Everyone's attention was divided and scattered. It was the perfect time to strike. He came with an army, 200 wolves from the eastern mountain packs, supplemented by alphas from smaller territories who feared what the prophesied child might become. They thought they were attacking a weakened target. They thought Nikolai would be vulnerable. They were catastrophically wrong. Nikolai stood on the palace's main balcony, Deirdre at his side despite her protests that she should be resting. Their daughter lay wrapped in her arms, that strange silver glow still emanating from her tiny form. Below, Constantine's army surrounded the palace gates, weapons drawn, wolves shifted and snarling. "Alpha King Nikolai!" Constantine's voice boomed across the distance. He was a massive wolf, all brutal muscle and scarred hide. "Surrender the cursed child, and we'll let you live. Keep her, and we'll tear down your kingdom stone by stone." "Dramatic," Nikolai murmured. "I appreciate the commitment to theatrics, really, but he should have done his research better." Deirdre shifted the baby, her own power beginning to rise in response to the threat. "What do you mean?" "He thinks he's facing the old Northern Kingdom, the lone Alpha King and his advisors." Nikolai's smile was sharp and cold. "He doesn't realize everything changed the moment I claimed you as my mate and our daughter was born. He's not facing an Alpha King anymore." He raised his voice, letting it carry with supernatural force across the assembled army. "Constantine, you've made a critical error. You've attacked the Northern Kingdom not during our weakness, but at the precise moment of our greatest strength. Allow me to introduce you to my mate, Luna Queen Deirdre, and our daughter, who is about to show you what the prophecy really meant." Deirdre stepped forward, her Luna Queen power blazing brighter. It was instinctive, this awakened strength. She didn't need training to know how to wield it. The power flowed through her as naturally as breathing, connecting to the moon that hung heavy in the dawn sky. "Those who lead through honor," she said, her voice amplified by her power, "have nothing to fear from my child. But those who've gained their positions through cruelty and corruption, your time ends now." She lifted their daughter high, and the baby's eyes flared with silver light. The power that radiated from that tiny form was unlike anything Nikolai had ever felt. Not violent, not destructive, but absolute in its judgment. It washed over Constantine's army like a wave, and where it touched, truth was revealed. The corrupt alphas, those who'd murdered their way to power, who'd abused their pacts, who'd ruled through terror rather than strength, they fell screaming. The baby's power didn't kill them. It simply stripped away the false authority they'd claimed, leaving them as common wolves, their ill-gotten strength bleeding away like water through fingers. Constantine himself dropped to his knees, roaring in fury and pain as centuries of stolen power evaporated. "No, no, what is this?" "Justice," Nikolai said quietly. "My daughter doesn't end lives. She ends tyranny, ends corruption, ends the rule of false kings who never deserved their thrones." But the power didn't stop with the corrupt. It also flowed to those who'd led with honor, strengthening them. Pack wolves who'd followed Constantine out of fear rather than loyalty suddenly found their own strength amplified. They looked at their fallen alpha with new eyes, seeing clearly for the first time what kind of wolf he truly was. One by one, they turned away from him, turned instead to kneel before Nikolai and Deirdre, recognizing true leadership when they felt it. The baby's power pulsed one more time, then faded. She let out a small yawn and snuggled closer to her mother, apparently exhausted by her first act of divine judgment. "Well," Deirdre said, her voice shaky with awe and relief. "That was unexpected." Nikolai wrapped his arm around her shoulders, careful not to jostle their sleeping daughter. "The prophecy fulfilled. She ended the Alpha King I was, the one who ruled alone through power alone. And she's ended every false king who thought they could threaten our family." Below, Constantine tried to stand, to rage, but his own former wolves held him down. One of them, a female with kind eyes, looked up at the balcony. "Alpha King, Luna Queen," she called. "We were wrong to follow this attack. Our packs have been freed from corrupt leadership. We ask permission to return to our territories and rebuild under true law." Granted, Nikolai said. Spread word to all kingdoms. The northern kingdom stands stronger than ever, protected by both Alpha and Luna power. Any who wish to join us in building a better world for all wolves are welcome. Any who wish to threaten us. His eyes glowed silver. Well, you've seen what happens to tyrants. The army dispersed peacefully, many wolves stopping to pledge loyalty before they left. Constantine was dragged away to the dungeons, stripped of power, destined to live out his days as the common wolf he'd always been beneath the stolen strength. When the last of them had gone, Nikolai finally let himself sag with relief. Is it over? Please tell me it's actually over. I think it's just beginning, Deirdre said, smiling despite her exhaustion. But at least we're beginning together. They returned to their chambers, the palace slowly settling back into calm. Healers checked on both Deirdre and the baby, declared them recovering well, and left them alone with strict orders to rest. Nikolai lay beside Deirdre on their bed, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. The prophecy that had driven them together, that had nearly torn them apart, had been fulfilled in a way none of them could have predicted. We need to name her, Deirdre murmured, stroking their daughter's soft hair. She's ended empires and defeated armies. She deserves a name worthy of that power. Svetlana, Nikolai said immediately. It means light, because that's what she is, what you both are, the light that ended my darkness. Svetlana. Deirdre tested the name, smiled. Perfect. The baby, Svetlana, stirred in her sleep, and Nikolai felt his heart expand in a way he hadn't known was possible. This was what the prophecy had meant all along. Not death, but transformation. Not ending, but beginning. I love you, he told Deirdre, the words coming easily now. Both of you. My mate. My daughter. My family. We love you too, Deirdre whispered. Forever. Outside, the sun rose over the northern kingdom, painting snow-covered peaks in gold and rose. A new era had begun, one ruled by Alpha and Luna together, by power tempered with compassion, by strength that protected rather than destroyed. The prophecy that had seemed like a curse had given them everything that mattered. And Nikolai, who'd lived 300 years alone, finally felt complete.